Welcome back to Against the Cage, your MMA home for all the previews, recaps, and exclusive interviews that I know you're looking for. My name is Jake Aryeh. I'm here with my esteemed co-hosts Scott Fontana and Erich Richter. And guys, we're finally coming off of the first UFC event of 2026, UFC 324 in the main event for the interim lightweight championship. Justin Gaethje once again on a win streak, defeating Paddy Pimblett. And Scott, you wrote an article after the main event about the fight between Justin Gaethje and Paddy Pimblett. Could you tell us more about that?
Well, yeah, I mean, I was kind of feeling up to a column, so I decided to get a little opinionated here. And I made the case that Justin Gaethje getting the win over Paddy Pimblett on Saturday night, that opened the door for what ought to be, in the UFC's view, the ideal headliner for their White House card. You know, realistically, I know it's kind of like a little bit of a hot take, I guess. But hear me out. The TLDR here is that Gaethje, you know, he's the flag waving, well-loved American. He's got one part of this title here. Could be going against, or would be going against, the biggest, one of the biggest stars in the world, in the sport. And frankly, this is the type of thing that I think at least puts that American patriotism up right in front and center. And I think that's the kind of thing that the UFC ought to be targeting for this particular card, or at least what I imagine they'd want to be doing.
So, Scott, listen, I agree that Justin Gaethje will fight at the White House. You got one part of that wrong, and that is that he will be facing Ilia Topuria. Ilia Topuria is not going to fight at the White House. Ilia Topuria is not exactly trusted by the UFC right now. They have an interim belt on his. He fought this summer, and they already have an interim belt up for a lightweight, and that is because he's got a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes. I think Justin Gaethje is the perfect fighter for the White House. You laid out a very fair case. They nickname him Homer Simpson, American, and he's got the flag. He'll come out with the flag, and he's definitely he's got that. I guess he's got enough popularity where he can kind of maybe not carry the card, but he could definitely headline it. Now, what I think that you're missing here is the Ilia Topuria side is a little too. Dana White has said this repeatedly. He wants somebody that he can trust, him specifically, in this fight. Ilia Topuria does not profile as that right now. John Jones doesn't profile as that right now. And whoever has thoughts about this, and I'm sure you have many, Dana White loves Conor McGregor. They love each other. They like each other. They trust each other. And if you heard,
and he is notoriously reliable, I must say.
I'm not saying that he's reliable, and I agree that there is tons of different opinions on this. I'm just saying, from Dana White's perspective, he trusts Conor McGregor way more than he trusts John Jones, and likely more than he trusts Ilia Topuria right now. So,
Ilia Topuria has never failed to show up for a date.
Yeah, he only fights once a year, and they have an interim belt after he hasn't fought after 6 months. An interim belt after 6 months tells you so much. That there's no way. I
think what it tells you is that he wasn't ready to fight in January when they wanted him to fight. So they said, well, let's just make another belt so that we can have up for grabs in January. Sometimes they just create these belts because they need somebody on this particular date. Like years ago when they made the interim belt so that Cyril Gane could get the win over Derek Lewis, they needed somebody to fight in August. We had a situation where, if I recall correctly, Francis Ngannou was willing to fight like a month later or something like that, and they're like, no, not good enough, so we're gonna make an interim belt a month
Another
before.
guy that Dana White loves.
Sometimes you just need to be on but that doesn't matter. But for the purpose of this, it doesn't really matter. What we're talking about here is that sometimes they just need you on a particular date, or they need a belt on a particular date. If you're not there, we'll just make another one. So I don't know if that necessarily reflects on how unreliable Ilia Topuria is here. We've got Topuria saying, listen, I'm targeting April, May, June to come back. That's what the latest thing he's saying now. Could that change? Absolutely. But if he's saying that right now, and the UFC is willing to trust that, and that's the kind of thing, then sure, why not? But either way, regardless of whether it actually can happen or not, or whether it's going to happen or not, Justin Gaethje held up his end of the bargain, which was basically the whole point of my column. Is it set up a fight that ultimately is going to happen. It certainly lines up that it can happen that date. Whether it will, I don't know. There's entirely possibility that he's just not going to be ready for that date. But I don't know if it's because the UFC can't trust it. It's probably just, hey, I'm not ready, so they won't do it.
Yeah, I mean,
So I totally I don't agree that the interim belt that putting an interim belt on lightweight means nothing. I like to read into this stuff a lot. After 6 months, they threw an interim belt on lightweight. The things that you hear prior, by the way, about the UFC and Ilia Topuria wasn't great because he only fights like once a year. He's not active. So, to throw an interim belt after him not fighting for 6 months is the basis of my argument for why that I don't think that they will trust him enough to headline the White House card. That's the way that I look at it. And like you brought up the Francis Ngannou thing. The UFC doesn't. If the UFC doesn't like you, they throw an interim belt on. We've seen this many times. That's like maybe like one of their pressure cookers to get you into the octagon sooner. So I saw that he was talking about April, May, June. I know he's selling his house in Madrid. There's a lot going on at lightweight. I really think that Conor McGregor is going to fight at the White House. I really do. And in terms of matchup, you saw that Dana White said Michael Chandler's not happening. So if it's not going to be Michael Chandler, I think that there's only two options, and it's Justin Gaethje or Jorge Masvidal.
well, so I'm
I'm still having trouble. I'm still having trouble wrapping my head around the Ilia Topuria is not reliable, even though he's met every single date that he's been scheduled for. But hey, Conor McGregor much more reliable. Who last time they booked him could not make
arguing that. I'm not arguing reliability versus reliability. I'm arguing relationship with Dana White versus relationship with Dana White. Conor McGregor and Dana White are like this.
Well, guys, we're gonna hear
one of them has a
more
contract in place. One of them does not. Apparently, there's a big dispute over contract.
That's a bigger discussion.
Conor McGregor. That's a gigantic hurdle. So I don't know about that. Yeah. But Jake, you're trying to get us to move on.
I'm gonna interject here because we should be hearing a little bit more and more about that White House date. Maybe we could talk about this a little bit more because I could see there's quite a lot of passion from both of you guys. But I do want to get to the fight and what you guys took away from it because we got a lot to cover in this episode. So I'm gonna throw it over to you, Eric, because I know you had some questions about Justin Gaethje going into this fight. So I want to ask you, what questions did he answer for you in this performance?
Well, he's definitely, was getting up there in age. I thought this past weekend we saw a Justin Gaethje that is desperate, a Justin Gaethje that was throwing all cautions to the wind. And they were saying on the broadcast, this is the old Justin Gaethje where he is just coming forward and he doesn't care what you're throwing at him, but he's coming forward. He's going to hit you harder than you hit him. What we saw from Justin Gaethje, he's the most violent striker in lightweight history. He's the most dangerous guy. Like if you just look at Paddy Pimblett's face, look at all of his opponents' faces after they fight him. Striking with him is a stupid idea. And like Justin Gaethje, you can't strike with him. I mean, like, look, he has been knocked out. Max Holloway did it. We've seen it, and he's getting a little bit older. We've seen it. We've seen all that. But his striking is still so far elite that anybody that's going to go in there and fight with him, they have to be looking at this matchup specific. And to answer the question, Justin Gaethje is just the scariest striker still, even though he's getting up there in age and he's fought a lot and taking a ton of damage. It doesn't matter. It's unbelievable.
Scott, how about you? Any questions you had answered by him?
Just to piggyback off of Eric here, I mean, I would say yes, absolutely. He showed that he can go back to that old strategy, right? That dig deep brawl type of thing that he can put in your face. That we hadn't seen as much of late. That's certainly something in his back pocket. It's not something he's moved away from completely. It seems like now it's like, okay, what's the right matchup for me to kind of go one way or the other? Or, I'm sure there's varying degrees of that too. It's not just A or B. There's probably, C, D, E, F that are just similar to those, right? The only thing I would just disagree with Eric there is, look, he's definitely one of the most devastating strikers at lightweight, but I don't know that someone like Ilia Topuria, for example, I'm sure he's pretty technically sound enough that he could probably navigate a lot of the, let's say, less technical elements of Justin Gaethje's striking arsenal, right? That's the kind of thing that Max Holloway brought to the table and made it much harder for Gaethje in their fight. But to go back to Gaethje himself, right? I think putting the pressure on Paddy, punishing him in the process, these type of things, that definitely answered a lot of the questions of like, what's he going to be doing? Is he going to be only going that old route? It was nice to see. It was certainly the right call. Jake and you and I both agreed last week that was kind of like the strategy we thought might be better here. And fortunately, he went with that and it worked out for him. The only other thing I would say is, man, he looked damn good for 37. So that answered a little bit of that age question, right?
100%. And for me, the biggest takeaway was that Justin Gaethje still has this uncanny ability to just always, a Justin Gaethje fight will be a Justin Gaethje fight he hasn't given us any reason to doubt that. Ilia Topuria, like you said, he might be the one person to be able to navigate that situation, but it's going into a fight where it's like striker, grappler sort of matchup. The only person we've ever seen who has been able to, even in the first round of the Khabib fight, that fight was mostly standing up until the second round when it did get taken down and he got choked out by Khabib. But even for someone who has like the grappling prowess of Khabib, that first round was mostly on the feet. So Justin Gaethje just has that ability to, I don't know, pull his opponent into a striking battle, even when everyone else is saying, like, go for the takedown, go for the takedown. And credit to Justin Gaethje, I mean, keeping him away with the jab and defending the takedowns that Paddy did go for. But yeah, that was my biggest takeaway, is Justin Gaethje's still able to make it his fight, you know? Well, so I want to talk about Paddy Pimblett as well, because obviously this was a all-time entertaining fight. I think this is already a fight of the year contender. So I want to throw this to you, Scott. For Paddy, do you think that this was a net loss or a net gain? Obviously, he was the favorite into this fight, so he didn't live up to the expectations in terms of getting the win. But what do you think? A net loss or a net gain for Paddy?
Maybe this is a little hot takey, but I'm going to say it's a small net gain, actually. Even in a loss, I think he showed that he absolutely belongs fighting these elite lightweights here. This is the level he's supposed to be competing against, whether he beats them or not. This is about where he is. He probably could have, on the right day, shown up and defeated Justin Gaethje, but maybe we'll figure out some of that a little later in the show. I think we're going to talk about it. But look, I think he learns a lot from this fight. Number one. I don't think it sets him miles back in his career. He entertained. I don't think his star took any, real shine off it. People still are all about Paddy Pimblett. If you were before, he didn't come in as like an unbeaten wrecking machine. So what's one loss here? It's not that big a deal.
How about you, Eric?
We're going to disagree on everything today. I'm going to go net loss.
That's okay.
For sure on Paddy Pimblett. The net loss here is, again, came in here as a favorite. And he jumps in and he gets into the striking battle with Justin Gaethje, and he takes so much damage. From my perspective, there was no grappling. I don't think he had any business losing this fight. Just quite frankly, like the way that I used to work for the Action Network, and one of my favorite MMA podcasts is Billy Ward and Sean Zarrillo do their betting podcast. And Billy Ward took this, and I'd love to be able to claim this, but he said Paddy Pimblett is a poor man's Charles Oliveira. And he's right. The fact that there was no grappling in the first 3 rounds, none, and not even a guard pull attempt, is just malpractice from Paddy Pimblett. He said after the fight, and I think even, I'm sure multiple times over concussed, able to say, I didn't need to prove to everybody how tough I was in there tonight. And I did, and I didn't need to do that. I was like, yes, like you definitely, like, it. You didn't need to show everybody how tough you were. You should go out there and get a win. So I'll go net loss, because I don't think he should have lost this fight. I really don't. I think that this was his night, that he could have come in there, gotten the win, taken a massive rub on the biggest stage that he's ever fought in, and he came up short with a bad game plan.
I'm really curious, actually, how they end up matching up Paddy going off of this one. It's obviously, like I said, I think he actually belongs at this level. Seems like you do too, if you're saying he really shouldn't have lost the fight. So, yes. What do they do with him next here is kind of the curious thing. The only thing I'd come up with here was maybe the winner of this coming weekend's fight, Rafael Fiziev versus Mauricio Hufi. I think that would be fun either way, and I think all parties would deserve that matchup. How do you guys like that one?
I'm good with that. I had Dan Hooker out there as well.
Oh, that would be, I mean, they've got a lot of pretty.
But is that win or lose for this weekend?
Right.
Yeah. I would say it's a loss in terms of obviously where he is in the title discussion and all of that. But I will say in terms of the net gain, it's like we didn't think that his path to victory in this fight would have been striking with Justin Gaethje, and obviously it ultimately wasn't. But he was able, he showed that he was much more than just a grappler, right? So in that sense, I think that he's got a little bit more of a well-rounded game than maybe I would have given him credit for. Obviously, he's a mixed martial artist, as he said to you, Scott, in the interview that you guys had done together. But I think he was able to show that he's able to brawl more, like with the best brawler pretty much out there. But I want to throw it back to you, Erich, because we are talking about the future of Paddy. What do you think he needs to change for him to become the face of this division and possibly for the UFC, like maybe they think that he has the potential to be?
Yeah, well, so during the fight, Paddy Pimblett was throwing these really weird punches. They're basically like almost like hammer fists, but like out of like a conventional stance.
Yeah.
Paddy Pimblett's just not the most technical striker, and him getting into a striking match with, in my opinion, the most violent striker at lightweight is a terrible formula for him to get a victory. And I was tweeting this out during the fight, and he was just ignoring corner advice for the whole first 3 rounds. They were screaming, begging for a takedown. And we'll talk more about Paramount, but you could really hear the cornering advice this past weekend, which I really enjoyed. And him ignoring his corner's advice to go for takedowns early in the fight was baffling to me. And anytime that I see a fighter ignoring his corner's advice, I immediately get concerned about the outlook of that fighter going forward. Is it time for them to get a new coach? I don't know who his coaching even is. I know it's England based, but I'm not too familiar with them. If anytime I see a fighter ignoring corner advice, I get concerned about the outlook of their future. He needed to be grappling in this fight, the whole fight. From the first minute, he should be looking to get this up against the cage and go for a back take, similar to what Charles Oliveira did to Dustin Poirier. I just don't understand the no grappling thing, and I'm confused about where Pimblett goes from here, from his game planning and coaching and training perspective.
I'm kind of on the same page there. Like you said beforehand, in terms of Paddy's comments, like I didn't need to show how tough I was. It was just like you're just thinking to yourself, like, why aren't you taking him down? But Scott, what are your thoughts?
Or at least trying.
Yeah.
I don't know that necessarily just because he's not listening to his corner that means it's time to move on or something like that. Because there are fighters out there who, it doesn't matter who their coach is, sometimes they're just not going to listen. They're going to do what they want to do. They are of the mind that, like, look, I was going to do this. Okay, I need to prove this to myself or whoever or whatever. This is just the way I want to approach it. And maybe Paddy is that type of fighter. Maybe you're right. I don't want to say it's certainly off the table that could be the possibility. But at the end of the day, it really just comes down to, no matter how we're saying it, Erich, I think it's just he's got to have better fight IQ. He needs to recognize in the fight what is and isn't working as well. If he wants to do it a certain way and it isn't working, he at least needs to understand, all right, look, if I'm going to get a win here, maybe I need to try something else. And it took him until the 5th round to do that. He finally started saying, okay, maybe I'll try to get the fight down to where I'm much better suited. He was just too stubborn. It just didn't work out.
Yeah. In terms of the coaches, I was going to say all they could do is. Sorry.
No, what do you got, Jake?
I was going to say, in terms of the coaches, all they can do is give you, the proper advice, which is go for the takedown.
Your water, they can't make you drink it.
Yeah, if he's not going to listen, he's not going to listen. Sorry to cut you off, Scott.
No. It's all good. It's all good. We're having a nice conversation here. To get back to the original question, right? Like, how does he become the face of the UFC or the face of this division or whatever you want to say? Obviously, that will include getting the title. Like, I don't think he could do that without actually winning the title, and not just the interim title. He would need to win like the undisputed title, right? I think it's gonna be really hard for him to actually be the face of it short of that. Having said that, there is another career trajectory for him if it doesn't go that way. Maybe he becomes some sort of Nate Diaz type who cultivates a huge following. It doesn't really matter how he does in the cage, as long as he fights in a way that we enjoy, that certain people enjoy, that people resonate with his personality, with what he brings to the table outside of the cage as well. Sometimes you just don't need the results in the UFC to get to that level, but I don't know that can make him the face of the UFC. And honestly, without that fight IQ, really improving, and probably he just needs to make some leaps in his striking acumen regardless. I think he's going to have a really hard time getting to the top of 155 pounds. It's just such a killer versus killer thing here.
Just to go back to it, I after thinking about it, I feel like if Paddy Pimblett had won, I think that there's a chance that it was Connor Pimblett at the White House. Maybe, maybe. I don't know for sure, but maybe.
We don't live in that world.
You still could,
Yes.
kind of.
Honestly, it makes more sense now.
It actually kind of does
Yeah.
make sense. I'm not gonna
Honestly,
lie.
off of a loss,
That'd be huge.
big for Europe.
That would be
and
a
then
big fight.
you're gonna, that'd be big. Everyone in Europe's watching that.
Not just big for Europe. That's a big fight for anywhere.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
For sure.
And that's an easy fight to throw together. I mean, getting Connor to fight isn't easy, but I'm saying like you're not giving up any belts, or like it doesn't really do damage to like the trajectory of the division.
Just make up a belt.
Yeah, honestly, they probably
You
would.
don't need a belt. You don't need to make up a belt. It doesn't matter.
Just for funsies. Just for the culture.
Well, if
Don't
we are
give them more ideas. We don't need more belts, Eric. Come on, cut it out.
Well, if we are talking about the trajectory of divisions and stakes and all that, let's talk about the bantamweight division, because there were two very important fights for the bantamweight division: Sean O'Malley and Umar Nurmagomedov. And I'll throw this one over to you, Eric, because I know you're big on Sean O'Malley. With both of their performances, did either have one that they needed to get a title shot? What are your thoughts on how those matched up?
Well, so the bantamweight title picture gets a little confusing here. Now with Petr Yan apparently undergoing surgery for some lumbar back issue. But in terms of the performance between these two, I don't know when a title shot would happen. But from my perspective, I feel like neither of them did a whole lot. Like Sean O'Malley, I thought looked really good in round 3, and there are some cases where there's like 5-round former champions or fighters that fight 5 rounds in my opinion, start slow once they move back to 3 rounds, because they're used to kind of pacing themselves out for 5. It's something that I've noticed a little bit and sometimes bet on, like a thought process that I bet on. So Sean started off super slow, and then by the 3rd round, was touching up Song Yadong. If that was a 5-round fight, Yadong was going out. I'd say Sean did exactly what I expected Sean to do. Umar really needed a finish here. And that's like the other bantamweight fight is, Umar, I thought really needed a finish. Kind of a boring fight against Davison Figueiredo. Only 34 significant strikes over a 3-round decision. Not what you're looking for to get a title shot. It just feels like we're on a collision course for Petr Yan versus Merab Dvalishvili for the title maybe in the summer.
Scott, what do you think?
Yeah, it definitely makes this trilogy fight to book between Yan and Dvalishvili. Like, it's the only thing that seems to line up pretty easily, and I think we would have said that beforehand. And now it's even easier because neither one of these guys put a stamp on it the way they should have. O'Malley, for a lot of you highlighted a lot of these reasons, frankly, Eric. So kudos to you, but. I think with O'Malley here, we're talking about somebody who, frankly, I did think that he rightfully won. I gave rounds 1 and 3 to O'Malley. I know some people kind of disagreed. I fall into the camp of thinking that he did deserve the win. He had a nice 3rd round, but it took him way too long to look like the Sean O'Malley of old. And I don't know that he even put the right type of memorable finish onto it that he could have anyway. So I don't think it was good for him. I don't think it was the right type of thing for him to say, yeah, I can sit out and just wait my turn. I don't know that it's going to feel that way for people. It's been a while since he won a big fight. We're talking about like this. You want to call this a big fight? Okay, fine. But I don't think this is a big fight. I haven't seen Sean O'Malley look like the killer that he used to be in quite a while. And for Umar, shoot, an aging Davison Figueiredo who couldn't be bothered to make 135 pounds when he used to be the 125-pound champion, he gave him some opportunities. Davison Figueiredo had chances in this fight. For someone who was just a prohibitively big favorite, the way Umar was, he just didn't look it. Obviously gets the win, but man, neither one of them looked particularly dominant in any way that I think we would have been hoping for someone who's going to get the next shot.
I agree. If we're gonna, I guess, give the edge to one though, I think you've got to go with O'Malley. And I while I do agree, like, yeah, it's been a while since we've seen O'Malley do what he has become, what he people fell in love with initially in terms of the striking, the knockout power, and all that. While we didn't see that entirely, I don't think it really mattered what performance he had. If he just came away with the win, the UFC is going to say, all right, his next fight is probably going to be for the title. Obviously, the rematch between Jan and Merab, I think, is what you do. But after that fight happens, I think the UFC is going to be pretty eager to just throw Sean O'Malley into that next title
You can't
fight.
do O'Malley. You can't do Merab O'Malley a third time at 0-2 if that happens.
Oh, sorry.
You know
Did
what
I say?
mean?
I said. Oh, sorry. I see what you're saying now. But Scott, it looks like you've got something to say.
Yeah, the only thing I would say to that is like obviously I get it. O'Malley is the bigger star, right? But they've been willing to make Umar be in big spots for quite a while. I think there is an affinity for working with Umar and the Nurmagomedovs and all that kind of thing. They see the value in that name that his cousin built, and Umar carries quite well. And I think there is something to that. Also, I think one of those things that actually goes in Umar's favor is that he's probably much more willing to take another fight between now and whenever that next championship fight on the other side of the trilogy fight would take place. That activity is the type of thing the UFC loves to have, loves to see, and you can't really do much more with Umar at that point. But Sean, I mean, it just seems like he's in this situation where he's pretty okay walking away from the sport at some point. And if he doesn't have, if he doesn't get the ball, he's just gonna sit on the bench until someone says, "Hey, you can have the ball now." And they can move on and they can give it to Sean whenever he's ready or whenever they're ready for him. So I think the UFC probably has some options there. They can sideline O'Malley and it'll be fine.
These are two very good points. So one for Eric as well in terms of the if Merab does win that trilogy, if that's what they end up doing, not a very appetizing fight, Sean O'Malley versus Merab a third time. And then, like you said, Scott, if Umar has like this amazing performance and Sean O'Malley's not ready or whatever is the case, they like to reward that kind of thing. So I could definitely see that being the case too. So guys are always
plenty of
changing their
options,
mind.
even though we didn't create great ones this weekend, right? It's like we would have preferred better ones, but I think there's still so many directions it could go in.
Absolutely.
What's tough for Umar is that he's nearly cleared out bantamweight, and O'Malley's not fighting him unless there's a belt attached to it. So if you just go down the list of bantamweight, you have to find a fresh matchup for Umar, and it's not that easy.
Down for sure. Up is the problem, right? Because he didn't beat Merab, and he hasn't even faced Petr Yan, and he hasn't faced Sean O'Malley either, which is a little below. Honestly, that would be the fight, but Sean doesn't look like he's going to be interested in that one in the interim. So yeah,
Enjoy.
but that would be. I mean, if all parties were involved, this would be perfect.
Yeah.
Dana White texts him, he's like, "Do you want to fight Umar?" O'Malley would respond, "I ain't reading all that. Sorry that happened to you, bro."
What was it when Aljo like held up his phone in the middle of the UFC card and he was like, "Rematch O'Malley," and like a minute later they showed O'Malley and he's like, "No." That's like exactly what it would be.
O'Malley's the A side on all these matchups. He can choose whatever he wants.
Yeah. Well, let's move down from 135 to 125 on the women's side. Natalia Silva came away with the win over Rose Namajunas. That was another fight that was I saw a lot of chatter on social media about the scoring of that one. So if you do have any thoughts on that, Scott, I'll be very interested in that. But obviously, Erin Blanchfield is kind of the other person that she's in this horse race with at 125. Do you think that with Natalia Silva's performance, where does that leave her in this title conversation with her counterpart of Erin Blanchfield going for that belt?
Real quick, before I get to that part, I'll answer the first thing you were talking about here. I'm going to give Natalia Silva rounds 1 and 3. Definitely 3. No one disagrees with that. No one disagrees with Rose Namajunas getting round 2. It's that first round that's the close one here. It's not a hill I'm going to protect very heavily, but I would say Natalia Silva in that round, because I think she came on a lot better in the second part of that round, really the last 2 minutes or so. She was really starting to land her offense, and neither one of them had done a whole lot before that. So I think if there's a pendulum, it was first for a little while on Rose's side, and then it was pretty easy to go the other way in terms of what happened in the last minute and a half, 2 minutes or so. But yeah, you guys, you can't get too hung up on these rounds when the fighters themselves are not willing to go out there and put their stamps on it here. So, and that I think is the problem with Natalia Silva's performance here, right? It's just not the type of thing that she needed to do to be able to put a stamp on something when there is a perfectly acceptable, possibly much more than acceptable kind of relatively interesting for the weight class right now option in Erin Blanchfield. Natalia Silva is just not. She doesn't have the reputation of a finisher. It's been a while since she's got any finishes. Erin Blanchfield coming off of a nice finish over somebody the UFC likes to promote a little bit, Tracy Cortez. That was a rematch in the making for a while as well. I think that you got a much easier highlight package to put together for Erin Blanchfield. She's American. She speaks English very well because she's American. She's from Jersey. And
Yeah.
I think that's the type of thing. It makes it a lot easier for them to say, like, look, we're going to go with Erin Blanchfield here. She's earned it. She's put in the work. She's got the wins. She's got the finishes. We're gonna go with her against Valentina Shevchenko, maybe even at the White House.
I was just about to say.
I think this is the type of fight because again, look, going back to what I was saying before with Gaethje, I think they want to put Americans in position where they can win championships or keep championships. I think that's the type of thing that the UFC ought to be targeting with this card, or frankly, you probably should be and thinking that way with their card. I don't know if it's going to be one of those 5, 6, 7 title things. I don't know if it's good. The cards are going to line up. I think they'll get as much as they can, but if they can focus on American fighters in particular, that's going to be where they go.
Eric, where's your head at with this horse race?
The flight was bleh. Bleh performance from Natalia Silva didn't really do anything for me. I was sleepwalking through the second round. Third round was, I guess, slightly more interesting. I want to see Erin Blanchfield fight for the title. I think that there is not holes. There's no holes in Valentina Shevchenko's game. But if there is any opportunity, I think that it is in the grappling against Valentina Shevchenko, because Valentina will lean on the grappling and has that advantage over a lot of the women at this division. We've seen it many times, obviously, against Zhang Weili being one specific. I think that Erin Blanchfield has an opportunity to outgrapple Valentina Shevchenko, and we saw it with Alexa Grasso, and that's what I want to see. I don't want to see Natalia
Kyla
Silva.
Santos was another one too. That was one
Yes.
that kind of went that way as well. I think there is, to your point, there's certainly a blueprint out there if you're looking to have some measure of equalization, some measure of success. If you have some acumen in the grappling department and you could take advantage, I think it helps to have the striking to be able to, balance it out, more dangerous. That would be the question. We don't have to break down the potential fight that may or may not be happening next anyway, but I think that is the key there. But yeah, I would put a button on it unless you've got something, Jake. Yeah, I think Eric and I obviously both agree that that fight was just not the performance Natalia Silva needed, not even close.
Yeah, I'll tie a bow on this one. I'm agreeing with you guys. I would prefer Erin Blanchfield to get the title shot with Valentina just because it's a more enticing fight in terms of something that I would actually like to watch. And in terms of merit and all that, I think the two are pretty neck and neck. If you look at their resumes and who they've beaten, it's all pretty similar. You could maybe give a slight edge to Natalia Silva just because that win over Alexa Grasso right after coming off being champion. I think that counts for something, but it's quite close, and I think that we're going to get a more entertaining fight with
I would argue it counts for less now. I think having this fight in between almost made it took away a little bit of the shine. I think it would have been smarter for them, especially for her, to have had that performance next. But that wasn't really in the cards. She probably didn't have that chance. She's like, you got to fight this one. And if you win, maybe you'll get that championship,
Yeah. Well, guys, this was also the first card of the Paramount Plus era. And, we're going to give more of our in-depth thoughts on next week's episode because, this was the first one. And like they mentioned during the broadcast, some things are probably going to change. So we'll watch this weekend, see what we feel about the rest of how everything's being done. But just to get your brief thoughts, I'll go first. We're going to give a little quick letter grade about how we think this one went. I'm going to give this one a B, a grade in progress, you could say. I'm going to give this one a B. I think it was solid. There were some technical issues, especially in the pre-show that I kind of noticed. Weird audio stuff. Obviously, that counts for less than the main card, the prelims and all that. The pacing was a little off, but again, first card. So, Scott, what do you think about how this first Paramount card went?
Yeah, great in progress. I'll go with B2. I think that's fair. It's not like this was even remotely a disaster. Some hiccups. I also thought it was strange that we had basically no changes to the graphics or anything like that. You'd think that they would go for a little bit more of a little facelift going into a new deal as they've done before. Didn't really do that here, but yeah, like you said, it sounds like 325 is going to be a little bit more natural for what we can expect from the UFC on Paramount experience going forward for these next, almost 7 years that we have left. So I'll withhold a lot of judgment until next week.
Eric, what about you?
Totally agree about the graphics thing. I was super confused by that. I was hoping to see a little bit more blue with the more consistent with the CBS Paramount branding in their graphics. There wasn't really. The only graphic thing that I saw that was different was the microphone said UFC Paramount Plus on it and not ESPN anymore. That was really it. Grade wise, I give it an A minus. I think the UFC is about to explode. I'll get more into that probably with an article on your post website, but I think that this is UFC is an amazing spot. The advertisements were a little bit much. There was a little bit too much, and we talk about they took away some of the walk-ins. They took the fighter walk entries. Took away some of the corner work. They need to work on that. But overall, I'll go A minus. I'm super bullish on the UFC Paramount era. I think that the sport's about to pop, and it's just so good not having to pay $90 for a pay. It is so much better. It was such a ripoff under ESPN. I can't say it enough. ESPN was robbing us. They were the worst.
Well,
Truly the
It was
worst.
rough.
I'm gonna let you finish that thought next week, Eric. When we see if this one's any better than the one that we had last weekend, I think we'll have a lot to talk about in that realm. But let's talk about UFC 325. Also, guys, let us know in the comments what you thought about 324, about the first card on Paramount. How do you think it went? And give us your thoughts on the title fight and all the rest of those fights that we mentioned as well. But let's get into UFC 325 this weekend. Featherweight title up for grabs. Alexander Volkanovski and Diego Lopes once again fighting for the 145 strap. But let's talk about Volkanovski first. And Scott, I'm going to throw this over to you. That first fight, less than a year ago, back in April, I want to say, in Miami. How did that first fight shape your perception of Volkanovski? Over 35, two-time champion. What do you think about that one?
Yeah, how about Volkanovski finally getting to defend a championship in his home country? That never happened before, which I was surprised to hear. I
Wow.
believe it was when I was talking with John Anik had pointed it out. He fought for Islam's title in Australia, but
Mm.
he didn't defend his own title there ever. This is a great opportunity for him. But yes, to your question here, I think that the first fight, realistically, nobody thought Volk lost, right? Like nobody. No judge, no media score. If you look at MMA decisions, anybody who had like a real brain and really understands the sport, nobody was watching this saying, man, you could make a case for Diego Lopes. You cannot make a case for Diego Lopes winning that fight, right? It just doesn't happen. Three, maybe four rounds. There's a world where he wins all five. I don't know that I would have gone there. I had it 49-46 for Volk. But look, considering all the ways that he has to win, he's a legendary fighter. Lopez, look, he really only has this fight because two other more deserving contenders were passed over for reasons that didn't necessarily have to do with their in-cage results. There's some other things at play here. I think if you take away in that first fight those very brief high spots that Lopez had, and kudos, he had the high spots. It's really all Volk for most of the 25 minutes. So frankly, I expect Volk to be better prepared this time and to win even more convincingly.
Yeah, Eric, what is this first fight between the pair of them? What did that do for your perception of Volkanovski?
Upon a rewatch of the fight, I really saw nothing in the octagon that warranted Diego Lopes getting an immediate rematch in that fight. Even the knockdown, I thought was more of Volkanovski backing up more than he was rocked. I thought Volkanovski was kind of just moving his head back, got hit, and fell. I don't think that that was like a I was almost out. Maybe I'm just grasping at straws here. I didn't see anything really that showed that Diego Lopes should be fighting for the belt right now. Now that doesn't mean that he can't win. I just thought that Alexander win the second fight. I think that Alexander Volkanovski did a really good job counter striking. He had the grappling edge, which is semi surprising. When I talked to him last night. He said that he was going to come out with some new stuff, and he wasn't going to divulge exactly into what that was. I'm going to, using context clues, I'm going to say he's going to try to grapple and kick more. I don't think that I don't love the matchup for him. I think that Alexander Volkanovski is way more volume filled, and unless he just lands the shot of all shots and puts Volk out, which anyone has a puncher's chance, I think it's possible. I don't love this fight for Diego, and I don't really see the case for him getting an immediate title shot, but this is the world that we live in.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that first fight really just showed like how much experience can what that can do for a fighter like Volkanovski. He's been in those positions before, and I mean, he was able to handle a young, hungry contender like Diego Lopes, and he's still got it. Old man Volk, you know, he's breaking these 35 curses and all that. And like you said, Scott, I mean, there wasn't really any way you could have given that fight to Diego Lopes. So unless something crazy drastically changes, like in the interview with Diego Lopes, by the way, if you haven't watched that at home, go ahead and do yourself a favor and watch. But in the interview with you, Eric, Diego was saying like he wants Volk to come out, you know, a lot more violent and, you know, not as measured, I guess. He's like, that's better for me. I want that. I think that Volk's got the experience to not do that and make it his kind of fight. You know,
wishful thinking.
But Eric, I'll throw it back to you. Let's talk about Diego. What do you see as a path to victory for him this time around? I heard you do a little bit of prefacing, but what do you think?
Yeah. Well, he was like, I want a car crash. He was like, I want car crashes. I want as many car crashes as we can get. He was like, I want Volk to charge at me. He's like, I'm ready. And he kept going like this. He was like, this is what I want. And he's like, I hear you. I hear you. But there's no way Volk's going to do that. I mean, crazier things have happened, I guess, but there's no way. Volk's been in this game way too long. He knows that he could. If Volk could live on the leg kick and jab, he will. And I think that he can and will in this fight as well. In terms of path to victory, if Lopes really wants to change it up, I think he would need to go heavy on the offensive wrestling and try to get Volkanovski down. He looks bigger, especially in the first fight. He looked bigger in the octagon, which, you know, in theory would be helpful for him. But honestly, Volkanovski looked like he was better at grappling, just more technical and just more skilled. Obviously, Lopes might be a better submission grappler, but that doesn't mean you're a better offensive wrestler. So, you know, if Volk is going to be on the offensive wrestling side, then that really makes things difficult for Lopes. But maybe he's been working on it in camp. He's obviously training at Lobo's gym in Mexico with, you know, Alexa Grasso and their whole team over there. So maybe there's more to the story there, but that would be his path to victory is you really, really hunt for kicks in offensive wrestling.
Alrighty, well, because this one is another title fight and, you know, a numbered event, we're going to give our sports entertainment rating. I'll go ahead.
Don't I get to respond? I got some thoughts, my
go
friend.
For it. Sorry. I gave a little pause there. Go ahead. You're thinking.
No, that's all right. I got some thoughts on that. Look, and look, a lot of it piggybacks on Eric as well. But I think one of the keys to this here is he's got to use that larger size to wear him against the cage. I know he's talking about car crashes. I don't think that's going to work. I think if he brings that twisted metal, that burnout style stuff, I think that Volk's going to make him pay. But if he can lean on him, wear on him against the cage, maybe that's when he starts to, I don't know if he's going to tire out Volk, but at the very least, he's going to prevent that volume from piling up against him. Maybe he's able to get some sort of body lock takedowns here. If he can get it into that world, that's going to equalize it. And that's really what he needs to do, because outside of that, you said this before, Eric, it's basically just a puncher's chance. He can hit hard, but, you know, he basically just had very limited success in that first fight. And I don't know that he's that much better as a striker, especially not, 8 months later, 9 months later. There's not a lot of time to have gotten drastically better. I don't see it.
Yeah, and I remember you've said before, Scott, like you think that on that night, it was probably one of the better versions of Diego Lopes that we're going to get. So we'll see what happens.
Against Volk, yeah. I think that was about as good as it was going to go for him. And the funny thing is, I really could see Diego Lopes having a really impressive time at 145. And I think there's going to be a time pretty soon where Volk is not at the top anymore. It could be as soon as this weekend. I don't necessarily see it that way, but he is getting older. He's not going to fight forever. Maybe there's a time where Lopes is on top and he'll have better matchups, and I don't think this is one of them.
100%. In terms of like the whole Volk retirement thing, he has kind of poured some cold water on that. He's like, unless I get viciously knocked out again, then.
Well, he heard your prediction for the year, Jake, and he was like, nah.
He wanted to spite me. That's what it was. Well, let's go into the sports entertainment rating. Sorry for cutting you off earlier, Scott, but I'll go ahead and get us started on that. From a sporting aspect, I'm going to give this one I'm going to give it a 3. I don't think it's a 2, which I can definitely see more of the argument for last weekend's Scott. Now, I'm going to give this one a 3, a little bit more of an adjusted score for me there. Obviously, skipping over 2 guys, but Volk is the rightful champion at 145, so I'm going to give it a 3. Entertainment, For a title fight, I think I might give this one a 2. I'm like, we just saw this fight. There's 2 more guys, and that like means something for me.
Yep.
And I think Scott is also one to agree with that. But Eric, I'm gonna get your thoughts first before we hear Scott's. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm gonna go for sporting. I'm gonna go 2. You said it. There's 2 guys here that should be fighting. It's I'm not even gonna get into it. 2 for sporting. I'll go 3 for entertainment, and honestly, I feel like it could be 2 as well. So I'm gonna go 5 total. But honestly, I could have gone 4. I don't understand the matchup. I don't understand the thought process. I understand that Diego Lopes, they love Mexican-born fighters and all that, but I don't understand the thought process.
All right, Scott, what do you got?
I'm actually going a 3 on sports here, and I kind of wish that I had gone 1 last week so that this was more like a 2, but I think I throw off my own calculus here. So, well, this is a 3 from sports. Entertainment-wise, I'll actually give it a 3 because I don't think it's going to be a snoozer of a fight. And if you hear about Diego Lopes talking about car crashes, I think he's going to be more willing to make these things happen. He might pay for it, but that would be entertaining in and of itself. So I'm going with a 3 and a 3. That gives me a 6. Eric's got a 5. Did you have a 5 too, Jake?
I did.
So this is a 5.3. We're not talking about one of our most anticipated title fights here.
Anticipated? Certainly not, I would say. I think we could all agree there. Whether it deserves a 5.3, well, that's all in the past. Now what's done is done. But let's talk about let's talk about some of the other fights to watch. Scott, what is your fight to watch?
I'm going with Dan Hooker versus Benoit Saint-Denis in the co-main event. We didn't really get the chance to talk about this. I'm sure you guys have a little bit of thoughts here too. But I mean, look, this is the action fight in the co-main spot. If you're talking about entertainment, this is our 5. Absolutely. So I'm very excited for this one.
100%. Like I said in our MMA awards, Benoit Saint-Denis was my comeback fighter of the year, and it looks like he's kind of gotten a second wind in this lightweight division. So, I mean, Dan Hooker just came off of a fight with Arman Tsarukyan, so if Benoit can get a win over him as well, I think he's really getting himself back on track towards that title shot. But Eric, what do you think?
I'm going to go Mauricio Hufi versus Rafael Fiziev. I think that this has implications for the future of the division. And I want to see if Fiziev grapples, and I want to see who wins the striking exchanges. I mean, Fiziev kind of surprised us all with grappling last time out against Ignacio Bahamondes, who's way bigger than him. Was able to take him down 4 times and win by decision. So interested to see what kind of game plan Fiziev comes out with. And Hufi, super entertaining fighter, and strikes, and the kicks should be the kicks should be at a mosaic level. Like, they should be super entertaining kicks. A lot of spinning stuff, a lot of spied kicks and all that jazz.
All right. And for me, I'm going with Killen Salkilled, the Aussie native, going up against Jamie Malarkey. Killen Salkilled, you might. I'm hoping I'm saying that right because his spelling is an absolute nightmare. But you might remember him from this amazing knockout that he had in 2025. He's coming up against a bigger name than some of the opponents that he's had before. But yeah, I'm kind of just looking to see if he's got another crazy performance or finish in this fight, just because of how unbelievable that knockout was. So I think this is one that I'll be having my eye on. But in terms of the other fights on the card, Scott, what is our event rating for this one in Australia?
By the way, I like that you picked it's an Aussie versus Aussie fight. That's actually pretty interesting there.
I actually didn't realize that Malarkey was also an Aussie native. Malarkey sounds like a British name, but
imagine that.
I know.
Anyway.
I know. My history. There we go.
Historical ramifications.
Yeah, there you go.
Do your research, everybody.
Penal colony. That's not. Yeah. I'm not accusing everybody of that. Anyway, look, the event rating for this. The event rating for this one is a 42. Look, typically top heavy, Aussie numbered event, right? We got very strong main, very strong co-main. I understand Lopez is not necessarily our number 1 contender here. He's actually ranked 7th at Fight Matrix in featherweight. So we're not really talking about even a top 5 guy based on Fight Matrix's metrics that decide this, right? Nonetheless, I think these 2 fights, people are looking forward to them in at least some measure, right? It's not our most anticipated title fight. Good fights nonetheless. It's after that where it starts to fall off. We're very light on top 100 talent for a numbered event. There's actually fewer deep prospects though on this one than you might normally see. There's only one fighter out of the top 200. Given that there's, I believe, 14 fights on this card, that's pretty solid. And it is higher rated than last year's card in Sydney, UFC 312. That was the one headlined by Dricus du Plessis against Sean Strickland, their rematch. So look, it's a better card for Aussie, I think. Yeah, their best, decent, but you don't have to pay anything for it any more than you already paid for your Paramount Plus subscription. So not that bad.
Yeah, in terms of the stuff below the main event, I think we're getting a much better Australia card than the one we got last year with du Plessis and Strickland. That one was not good. So this one's a bit of an upgrade in terms of, besides the gold. Well, Eric, I'm going to throw it over to you for your 3 bets in 3 minutes to finish up UFC 325. You ready?
Thank you, Jake. Welcome back. 3 bets in 3 minutes. Bad showing last week, and it's tough because when it comes to the betting world, the goal is just to beat the line. And if that was the only criteria, I'd feel pretty good about it because, we had Arnold Allen plus 230 last week, and he closed plus 175, but it still lost. So, end of the day, when you beat the line by 25%, got to be happy about it. We move on. UFC 325, 3 bets in 3 minutes. Put 3 minutes on the clock. Give me 1 second here. 3 minutes on the clock. 3, 2, 1. And we are going to start on the main card. And we're going to start with Rafael Fiziev versus Mauricio Hufi. Interesting fight, right? We got 2 strikers here. Now, where things get really challenging is Mauricio Hufi's his grappling was obviously tested in a big way against Benoit Saint-Denis, and that wasn't a great look for him. And now he fights Rafael Fiziev, which in theory would profile as a better matchup for him. Fiziev's a very solid striker in his own right. Actually been looking to grapple a lot recently. A lot of takedowns in his last couple fights. He had multiple takedowns last time out against Ignacio Bahamondes, as I had already mentioned. This is a tough one for Hufi. I like the fight to go to decision for what that's worth. I think they're just both really solid at striking. I don't expect anyone to really make a mistake here. And from a betting perspective, I do see value here on Rafael Fiziev to win by decision at plus 210. I think those odds are fantastic. I don't think he's going to be really hunting for submissions here. So I think that a decision is a fine option. You get the better mixed martial artist who does more on the feet or in the grappling and just more well-rounded at this point in his career. So give me Rafael Fiziev plus 210 by decision as the official pick. And then we move on. Dan Hooker versus Benoit Saint-Denis. I don't know how many times I need to say this about Dan Hooker. The fact that he's rated number 6 overall is just mind-blowing to me in the division. Dan Hooker is not the 6th best fighter in this division. He's not even top 10. Maybe he's top 15, maybe. Dan Hooker's taken a ton of damage in his career, and that's kind of been his shtick. He's I have the best durability, right? He's always talking about having the best durability. Basically, what that means in MMA is, I'm the best at taking damage and then sticking around. That's not a good place to be in the mixed martial arts game. Hooker's not the best grappler. He's not. He's a pretty solid striker. At his best, he was a solid striker. Obviously, that fight against Dustin Poirier is one of the best of all time, but I'm going to take Benoit Saint-Denis here inside the distance. He's a minus 300 favorite, so you're not going to get a ton of value there. Minus 145 to win inside the distance. Plus 430 by knockout. I kind of like that one, so that's my official pick. Benoit Saint-Denis by knockout, plus 430 on FanDuel. We move to the main event. Alexander Volkanovski versus Diego Lopes. I talked to Diego Lopes. I want more car crashes, right? He's not going to get that against Alexander Volkanovski. Volkanovski might be the smartest fighter in UFC history. He's got the best feints. His jab and leg kick combinations are excellent. And Diego Lopes, I expect him to be a little bit more offensive with the wrestling, but I think Alexander Volkanovski is just a better technical wrestler. So from all those perspectives, I'm going to go Volkanovski here by decision at plus 190. Dude, if the fight is even close, the Aussie judges are going to give it to him. It's at his home country. So Alexander Volkanovski plus 190 by decision. Get on Bet Rivers right now. Those are my 3 bets, and let's get moving here. Let's just start the year off on the right foot, and we move on. Good luck.
Alrighty, thank you so much for that, Eric. And I'm going to throw it over to Scott for our quick hits in MMA news.
Now, look, I have to get to this right off the bat because we just didn't have time to throw us in or have any discussion about it, but. We had a big announcement at UFC 324. Dominic Cruz announced as the first member of this year's UFC Hall of Fame class. Well-deserved, of course, correctly predicted by John Anik when he was on our show earlier this month. And look, maybe he knew, maybe he didn't, but it was a no-brainer, right? This was going to happen once Dominic Cruz said, "I am done fighting." And he said that. He is here. Plaudits to Dominic, the Dominator Cruz. Read Dana White's lips. No new taxpayer funds. The UFC CEO, speaking with Sports Business Journal, has assured the White House card will be funded by the company, not by our federal government. So your tax dollars will not be going toward this. Don't worry about that. That apparently is going to cost significantly more than the money pit of the Sphere card in 2014 that Dana White routinely complained about the costs of it, the ballooning costs. So obviously, this Paramount money is going to help pay for that in a lot of ways as well. Some unfortunate news for a former UFC champion. Rafael dos Anjos said on Instagram that he just had a third knee surgery in 14 months, given he's already 41 years old, hasn't fought since October 2024, and he last won more than 3 years ago. This is a very rough development for the former champion Dos Anjos. Some other unfortunate news for a fighter. This was kind of building. We heard about this last year. Closure in the Yasmin Lucindo situation where she had tested positive for the steroid mesterolone. She had accepted I think everybody had accepted CSAD, the UFC's testing provider. Had accepted this was from a tainted supplement, but nonetheless, she receives and accepts a 9-month ban, retroactive to September 24th. She is eligible to return on June 24th. Some UFC fight news, a little bit of fight news here. Cub Swanson putting off retirement. He's going to fight Nate Landwehr at UFC 327 in April. So, and that was Swanson himself reporting that one. And then here, this is a bit of a stunner, guys. This happened late last night. We started to hear, we actually had an announcement from Ryzen about this. Patchy Mix, who was on hand for this announcement, released from the UFC late last year. He is now fighting in March, on March 6th, against Kiyoma Akimoto at a Rising card. This will be at 145 pounds, so he's moving up in weight. He's fighting over in Japan, and he's fighting this teen prospect here. So very interesting development for the former Bellator bantamweight champion who just did not work out in the UFC. And that's all we got, guys.
Alrighty, thank you for that, Scott. And guys, it is time for the final round to go over our homework. Anderson Silva versus Dan Henderson at UFC 82 in 2008. And I actually had like a little bit of a light bulb moment in the middle of the fight that I had seen the end of this one like a while ago. And
Yes.
I think it was a UFC YouTube video. It was like the best submissions of all time. And I just remember Dan
That's
Henderson's
a famous highlight.
Yeah, it's a famous highlight.
Yeah, I've seen the highlight.
I remember Dan Henderson's face just because it's like that like frame of him with like his mouth open, like gasping for air.
That does make it. That makes
Crazy.
the highlight 100%.
So I was very surprised to see about Dan Henderson had some good success against Anderson in this fight. Like
Was
he was
winning the fight.
Yeah.
Yes.
amazing
At
success.
least
So
for
I
a
was-
period.
I've never really seen that before. Like, obviously, there's a few instances where Anderson Silva has had some fights that, like, Dana White wasn't very happy with, you know, not very entertaining ones, right? But this one was one where
Those
he
came
was,
later.
yeah, this one was one where he was getting pretty outclassed. And, like, Dan Henderson, I know, I obviously he's a UFC legend, but I didn't have the context to kind of put along with that. You know, this was one where, I mean, all I had was like the Bisping knockout, right? But a knockout's a knockout. It's not like dominating someone. Obviously, Dan Henderson ended up getting finished, but like he showed he could fight and beat someone who at the level of Anderson with a certain path there. So I thought it was really interesting. What about you, Eric?
Yeah, I was, the grappling exchange there was interesting because the body triangle was obviously hampering Henderson's ability to breathe. But, the way that the choke was in, I was confused because his neck was in the crook of his elbow and it didn't look that in, and he wasn't like fighting the arms at all. But I'm assuming that the breathing was constricted so bad from the body triangle that he was kind of also getting submitted by that. If anyone who's ever been in a really bad body triangle, they know like how difficult that can be to deal with. But yeah, Dan Henderson really solid with the grappling. Obviously, we'll see later on with Anderson Silva's career, Chael Sonnen have some success in the wrestling department. But yeah, it's a super fun fight. Anderson Silva's awesome.
It's that Team Quest wrestling. I think, Henderson laid a bit of a blueprint for Chael Sonnen to then subsequently put that into place in a style that was very specifically, I am going to take you down. That is the only thing I'm looking to do. And when I do, I'm going to punish you down there until I get triangled. But that is the Dan Henderson playbook. And look, Dan Henderson, by this point, was already considered like a budding great, right? He had already proven himself, 2 weight class champion in Pride. Nobody thought of him as anything less than a true champion of this sport. So when it was these two guys meeting, it's on the level. And I think the fight reflected that. It did go Anderson's way. Dan Anderson really wanted that rematch. It never quite happened for him. He moved on to Strikeforce at one point as well. That kind of really threw the wrench into making that a real thing. But I think he always regretted the fact that he never could get that rematch to show that he could beat Anderson Silva, because maybe he could have, but he didn't get to.
Would have loved to see it. Well, Scott, I'm gonna put you on a little bit of a rapid fire for these next few items because we're up against the wall here. What is our next assignment?
Giving you Thiago Alves against Martin Kentman. That's from 2012. It was the UFC on FX2 headliner, their second event for FX way back then. Wasn't a massively impactful welterweight fight at the time, but these guys had been staples of the upper levels of the weight class for years. Alves had challenged for the title at one point. Kentman had gotten very close a few times. Action fighter. It's a fun fight. Enjoy.
I will. If it's anything like the last few we've had. So to tie up our MMA history, what do we have this week in MMA?
8 years ago, on January 27th, 2018, Corey Sandhagen makes his UFC debut. He had just won by TKO at an LFA card 8 days before in 67 seconds, was feeling fresh. They got him into the UFC. He goes out there, he TKOs Austin Arnett, picks up 2 wins in the month of January. Very rare considering there's not a lot of MMA in January. And yeah, that was the start of his 5-fight win streak to start his UFC career. He's obviously had some wonderful success in the UFC. Corey Sandhagen, 8 years.
The Sandman. All right, and for those who are looking for one more fight outside of the major promotions, what can fans go out there looking for?
Check out Saturday afternoon, starting at noon on Octagon.tv. That is a pay-per-view. Octagon 83, the European promotion. They are filling their featherweight title that is vacant with Nikos Samsonidze against Mohamed Machayev. That is Fight Matrix number 61 versus number 76. Machayev out of Austria. He is younger. He's favored over the German who gets to fight in his home country. So that'll be an interesting fight.
All right. Right in the nick of time, guys. Scott, Erich, thank you very much for joining on this show. As always, a pleasure. For you at home, hope you enjoyed. Enjoy the fights, and we will see you next week.